Welcome to Brownfield's Next Gen podcast, where the future of agriculture gets a voice. This is your stop for real-world wisdom, fresh perspectives, and straight-shooting conversations that address some of the biggest challenges facing the next generation of farmers and ranchers. From planting to big-picture profits, we talk to the experts and dig into the tools, trends, and tough decisions shaping your operation and your legacy. Now, here are your hosts, Erin Anderson and Kellan Heavican.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Anderson, and this is Kellan Heavican. Welcome to the Next Gen podcast on Brownfield.
Thanks, Erin. Today, we're joined by Logan Bredemeier and Denise Scarborough. Both are farmers and lenders, and we are talking today about the lending environment that are facing young, beginning, and small farmers. And maybe before we kind of get into the meat of this, guys, why don't you introduce yourselves and just to give a real quick overview of your operation and the role in your lending institution. Denise, if you want to get us started.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you for having me today. My name is Denise Scarborough. My husband and I farm his family farm in Northwest Indiana. We raise soybeans, corn, commercial corn, seed corn, and wheat. Our kids are very active in the livestock show industry, so that keeps us on the road a lot. I have been an ag and commercial lender for almost 23 years. My husband and I started out our farming operation where we actually both worked full time. And then over the years, as our farm has grown, he has been able to work full time on the farm, and we actually have a couple full time employees now.
Yep. And then Logan Bredemeier, family farm with my brother and my father, raising corn, soybeans, alfalfa, hay, and then Black Angus seed stock cattle. So we have our own production sale with that. Been with my current lending institution for about 5 years now, and working mainly in ag and commercial.
Talk a little bit about the current lending environment that you both are seeing in your states.
We don't have a whole lot of diversified farms, into the cattle sector or into any sort of livestock. So heavy row crop in southeast Nebraska. Really starting to see some working capital losses starting to take hold on a large percentage of our producers, I would say. This past year, anywhere from $50 to $100 an acre working capital losses on that front, which will start to bleed over. Projections from last year were poor. Projections for this upcoming 2026 crop year don't look the greatest either, even using FSA recommended prices. So it looks like we're going into some grinder years for producers that are just straight row crop.
So we're a little bit different. We don't have much livestock sector around here where we are, but a lot of row crops. We're really blessed where we are. We have a lot of irrigation. We don't have any water issues in our area. And we grow quite a bit of specialty crops, a lot of seed corn, a lot of tomatoes for red gold, a lot of potatoes grown for black gold, and a couple other ones. So really that's kind of what's helping carry a lot of the farmers up in our area. Obviously row cropping is not cash flowing if you're growing straight corn and soybeans and not having any kind of diversification off of your farm. When I'm getting in a lot of 1231 balance sheets from customers right now, and I'm actually kind of seeing a steady mark in working capital right now moving across. Last year, we saw a pretty big blow due to commodity prices. Our yields, where we are, given as we were extremely dry, so a lot of irrigating this summer. And then parts of Indiana were really wet, putting crops in and a little late. But overall, yields have been very good in Indiana. So that has helped for the lack of pricing, is being able to have some of the yields make up for that. As I'm doing projections into next year, obviously trying to find a break even is really tough.
Have you guys seen a difference between, maybe some generational farmers that are coming into the office right now as we think of operating loan renewals versus young farmers? Are you seeing any differences there in terms of the cash flow that we're talking about, or other challenges that, maybe don't exist for the older generation?
I think some of the older generation is probably thinking back to the things that they went through in the 80s. I mean, I was a young child in the 80s, watching my family go through that too. We don't farm with my parents and my brother. But, watching what my parents went through to where they've grown their operation today. And, I think a lot of it's, you just tighten the belt notch one more notch, buckle down a little bit more, eliminate some of the frugal spending. Honestly, family living and family spending is probably one of the hardest things to capture on a farming operation. And it's really where some of the missing numbers are
Absolutely.
in operations. I think you have a lot of young farmers that haven't been. I mean, this is essentially kind of an equivalent to the 80s, for the farmers that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. The younger generation hasn't seen anything, and luckily farming is generational, so a lot of times there is maybe some of that older knowledge to be able to fall back on.
Yeah, tell me in your experience. I mean, you're in your mid-20s, and so tell me about kind of playing off of what Denise has shared. Tell me in your experience what that's been like.
Yeah. So I have the fortune of working with a handful of really young starting up producers with my institution, 5 or 6 or something like that. So they're in the struggle bus right now is what I would really put them in. Some of them have just maybe bought their first farm using the FSA programs. So, even having off farm employment to help try to cash flow some of these things, it's really, really tough. And some of them their family's a small farmer. So there's not the equity base or the outside cash flow to really help support them. I mean, they're able to lean on other people for knowledge, other neighbors, their lending institution to some degree. But there's a handful that are struggling. And for myself, the off farm employment really, really helps try to keep things afloat when dollars start getting tight.
And from our personal experience on our farm, people ask me, you have full-time employees, why don't you work on the farm full-time? Well, health insurance and a steady paycheck are two really nice things to be able to support our family and continue to be able to
Absolutely.
grow our operation.
Now, you guys are talking about that off farm income piece as well. And in addition to working off the farm, you guys both are producers yourselves. So, talk about some of the challenges from the lending perspective, maybe in the office as you're talking to clients. Are there any similarities that you're seeing in terms of challenges that producers are struggling with right now?
I would say a lot of it all goes back to the cash flow side of things. We had some really, really good years and some really good yields in Southeast Nebraska, where we were able to have producers go out and get some updated equipment. And now you're in some tougher cash flow years where you might still have that payment hanging over your head. And maybe you lost some acres because cash rent's gotten out of hand to some degree. And, you know, you got to learn to roll with what you got or be willing to sacrifice something and give it up.
Agreeing with Logan, I'm pretty sure my husband does not enjoy his wife being a lender most of the time when it comes to making purchases or doing things on our operation, because I'm the first one to say no, absolutely not. Um, but I mean, overall, our farm is definitely a joint decision, my husband and I, and being a numbers person, that's the first thing I always do. I mean, um, and then I agree with Logan totally. We had some really good times. A lot of new shiny equipment showed up on farms, and I think that's fine. But you still have to pay for it. And farmers sometimes get the mentality that they don't want to, they don't want to pay taxes. Well, sometimes paying taxes means that your farm is being being able to cash flow. It's being you're in the black and not in the red. Um, so just because one person has new shiny equipment, and the other person doesn't make them a better farmer or worse farmer. It's just all about each farm individually.
Give me some ideas and things that you're doing and you've heard with your clients that are doing in terms of off-farm income. And does that money support living expenses or does that go back into the balance sheet? I mean, how do you tell your clients to incorporate that?
Yeah, so I would say 90% of it would be going towards the family living side of the equation. it's that monthly paycheck where you've got monthly personal bills for groceries, utilities, maybe a home payment that we all need to kind of wrap up and involve in that cash flow to kind of go from that front.
I totally agree with Logan. Being able to have that off farm income to just basically just support your family living, at least make up part of that. Right now, a lot of my customers that I'm talking to kind of quit taking a paycheck or, have eliminated it to basically just cover their family needs because there just isn't the extra cash to go around. Um, and it's really hard. Like it's hard having those conversations with customers. When things were good, it was easy to buy things. It was easy to spend extra money and go on vacations, and you get accustomed to that, and trying to back down is really hard. Um, and when you lay it out there for their customers of really what their family living expenses is, it's pretty eye opening.
There's a lot of individuals that think they live on $2,000 to $3,000 a month as a family, and suddenly you start adding on, and you creep up to that 75 to possibly $90,000 a year of family living expense. Once you start wrapping everything up, and it gets really, really eye opening for customers.
And kind of an industry standard when we're looking at family living expense. um we're looking at 20 to $30,000 per adult, and 10 to $15,000 per kid. So a family of four,
Oh,
you're at $80,000 pretty quick.
I think that's something that's pretty unique on the ag industry side. I mean, you have your family living expenses, taking care of those regular bills on a daily basis, but then also taking on those farm expenses. How do you guys balance that? I mean, how do you determine where some of that cash flow goes on both sides of the scale?
I guess for our operation, we keep things pretty black and white between our farm and our family living. Me working off of the farm allows us to be able to support our family living and kind of help pay for the things on the personal side. Um, and then everything for our farm just goes back into the farm. We also own an excavating business also, so that also generates some additional income kind of this time of year. I mean, we are basically in whiteout conditions here right now today, so we're not doing too much excavating in cold, but that kind of helped offset some of the winter months of being able to get some extra cash flow in for what we have. But by doing that over the years has allowed us to build some extra cash flow and cushion on our farming operation for times like this. I mean, things are tight for us too, but when you can plan ahead and keep that rainy day fund built up for your operation and use it for a time of need, which is right now, not to go buy a new pickup truck or a new planter. Um, and I think a lot of it's just, I've been lending since I got out of college. That it's been my full time job for a couple different institutions, and um, I think having a relationship with your lender is essential, because if you are somebody that's just looking for the lowest interest rate and you hop around to different lenders, you don't have that relationship built. So when things get tough, your lender, if they don't understand your operation, it's going to be a lot harder to pick up a new relationship. When working capital's down, when maybe you've overextended yourself a little bit and you don't have that relationship to maybe do some kind of a workout loan or something to help get you back on your feet for the next couple
yeah,
of
I
years.
would echo much of the same. Personally, from my standpoint, and what I've seen with some of my customers is that separate checking account that your payroll check goes into, separate of the farm. So you're keeping your expenses separated on that front. So you're able to track, if you want to track or are willing to track, where your expenses are really going. Of course, there's always some stuff that gets blurred. Fuel's a real easy one. Well, I can just fill up the farm barrel and it doesn't matter. Um, so there's some of that tied up in there for sure. And then, like Denise said, that keeping that rainy day fund separate for when times get tough. It takes time and practice to get that built up, but you better try to maintain it as best as you can.
You both mentioned this idea of having conversations right now and having some tough conversations given the economic backdrop that farmers are facing. So, in your experiences, what do young farmers need to know right now going into the bank, to their institution, trying to figure out what 2026 looks like? what are some things that you guys would suggest that they need to know to help them work through and get off the ground here in 2026?
For me, doing a 12/31 balance sheet is essential, or whenever your operations year end is. I know if you have a corporation, or sometimes they have a different year end than a 12/31, but being able to do a 12/31 balance sheet so it coincides with your tax return. So, we have a lot of farmers that carry over grain. So it allows us to see, okay, so what grain was from this year? What grain did you carry to next year? Where are we missing in a cash flow, and be able for us to do some accruals on that operation. But being able to do a balance sheet on the same date every year allows us to be able to track that operation better, whether you've had growth, whether you've had loss, and then I can tie it back to that tax return. But the biggest thing is knowing your break even on a farming operation. We don't have livestock, so Logan, you can probably talk a little bit more about that. But on your grain farm, if you have a farm and you basically need to break each farm down piece by piece, and if you are consistently losing money on a farm, that is not a benefit to your operation. I am seeing we've got some marginal ground in our area, and unfortunately, that a lot of times is what some younger farmers start out with, because it's what some of the more established farming operations don't want. Well, that's fine, but you also still have to be able to cash flow that. It may not give you a record yield, but if you can, you know, you know, take a hard look at your inputs, and you can take a look at your what you're having to pay for rents on it or shares. Um, being able to buckle down and knowing exactly where every dollar of your operation goes, that's going to get you the farthest in being able to cash flow in your operation. And it's hard, and nobody wants to give up farm ground either. Because once you have it, the chance of getting it back is hard.
I would echo a lot of the same things, that consistent balance sheet year over year over year, even if it's, November 1st or whatever it might be, just the consistency is key on that front. And, when you go in to meet with your lender, be willing to have an open and candid conversation about where you currently sit and where you think you need to sit going forward, and what you think you need to change, and be willing to take on whatever our feedback might be. It might not be the most positive feedback in the world, but take it all with a grain of salt, because we're working with a lot of other people that might be facing some of the same situations. And, one other thing I would add would be willing to think outside the box, in terms of diversifying your cash flow. If it's okay, maybe this year I'm going to plant some specialty white corn. You know, there's its own challenges to that, but think outside the box, outside of just the standard row crops.
What are some of the resources that you both utilize on your operation that you find helpful during this time of year, loan renewal season? Logan, I know um, you're a little bit newer to the ag industry. Denise, you're a little bit more established. So, talk about some of the resources that maybe you wish you had, some of the resources that you guys utilize pretty frequently.
Yeah, I go back to UNL's Center for Ag Profitability, UNL CAP. I'll give them a little shout out there. It's a great spot to go. Pile of resources, whether it's financial information, uh, what the state has for a projected break even or cost of production. Iowa State Extension's got a great site to go and find some of that information as well. Those are probably the two places I go back to the most, in terms of generic information, and then just staying plugged into the markets wherever you are.
So on the ag lending side, we're looking at projections. We actually pull Purdue numbers and University of Illinois numbers, and um, for our bank, one of the lenders kind of puts together an Excel spreadsheet. So it's pretty easy for us to be able to run some projections on customers, and kind of using. We do have great diversification in the quality of soils that we have, and with the specialty crops, but it allows us to be able to put some numbers together pretty well on that. As far as personally on our operations, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm just constantly looking for new and better avenues. Obviously, I serve on the Indiana Soybean Alliance and the American Soybean Association. So following, the newsletters that come out through there and through Farm Bureau, we get so stuck, I think, in where we live. So I think this is really interesting that you've got somebody from Nebraska and somebody from Indiana on this podcast today, because we tend to get stuck in where we live and what we deal with here. We kind of forget what's outside of our bubble and what else is happening in agriculture, and kind of staying abreast on that. And different things that we can do to make sure that we understand what's coming or maybe could be coming.
Logan, Denise, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Kellan and Erin.
Thank you for having us.
This has been another edition of Brownfield's Next Gen podcast. For Erin Anderson, I'm Kellan Heavican. Thanks for joining us.